Hi, my name is Mandy Morris, and this is my individual integration project, A Trip Around the World, a study of oceans, continents, and landforms. This project was designed for first graders who are studying oceans, continents, and landforms around the world. According to the Georgia standards, the students should be able to identify the 4 oceans, 7 continents, and 6 major landforms around the world. And these landforms are mountains, deserts, valleys, plains, plateaus, and coasts. And the project that I created will utilize a variety of forms of technology, and it will also allow students to collaborate with one another, as well as allowing them to work individually on their final presentation. For the first part of my project, I presented a lesson about oceans and continents using an interactive whiteboard activity that I found for free on Promethean Planet. So as a class, we went through this together, and then afterwards the class worked together to label each of the oceans and continents. And as they were doing this, I was able to sit back and watch to see which students needed extra help and which ones really understood where all of these items were located. So this was a great formative assessment that I used. For part 2, the students learned about the different landforms, and they did this by using the Landform app on their iPads. It's just called Landform, and they worked together with a partner in this portion of the project. So they each had their own iPad. On one iPad, they were able to look through the Landform app to find each of the different types of landforms, and then also a fact about each one. And then on the other partner's iPad, they were able to create a graphic organizer using the app Poplet. And on this graphic organizer, they were supposed to write down each of the 6 continents, and then they were also supposed to write down something that described each of the 6 landforms. And then when they finished, they took a screenshot of their finished Poplet and they sent it to me. And for part 3, the students used their knowledge from the interactive whiteboard lesson and from the Poplet activity to create a My Story presentation. And in this My Story presentation, they were supposed to include 2 oceans and 3 landforms and 3 continents. And they could either draw pictures of the landforms and oceans and continents, or I also taught them how to search for images on Google and save those images to their iPad and insert those into their My Story. And then they also recorded on each page of their story a voiceover about the item that they presented on each page. And you can see a sample of a My Story presentation if you go to my Google website. You can see one there, but it was a little too long to include in my presentation since this can only be about 4 minutes. And for my reflection, I thought that this lesson went fairly well considering this was the first time that I used most of these apps with my class, and this was really the first research project that they did. Part 1, I realized that students needed some extra practice. Only a few of them did, but I realized that just the interactive whiteboard wasn't enough for some students to truly understand the concept. So next year I will definitely have other lessons available for those who need reinforcement. Part 2 was probably the most difficult aspect of the project, just because it was difficult for students to organize their Poplet, their graphic organizer, in the correct way, and it wasn't, the facts weren't always connected to the right landform, and so it wasn't that they didn't grasp the concept and understand about each of the landforms. It was more just learning how to use the app. So next year, I definitely think I will introduce the app earlier in the year and give them a chance to really understand how to use it before I have them use it in this lesson. And then for part 3, this was the most enjoyable part for my students. They loved creating the My Story, and they loved being able to Google images and to create their own story that they knew was going to be uploaded to YouTube for a bunch of people to see, for their parents to see, for other students to see. And then they also really liked being able to share their finished My Story with our 4th grade buddy class that we get together with once a month. So overall, I think that this project was a great success, and I think that my students really reached the goal of this project of being able to identify the oceans, continents, and landforms. So I think this is something that I will definitely be using again next year.